Okay, so here's a quick reminder of how Adobe Illustrator works. So Adobe Illustrator is a software for vector graphic, so it's a little bit different than rasterized graphic. So let's see what actually does it mean. So I will create new document. So this is new document that I've created. I will create one object. So let's start with simple ellipse. I've created an ellipse, and if I zoom in at my ellipse, so I can use Alt and scroll on my mouse to zoom in, you can see that in opposite of what you normally see in Photoshop, we are not able to see pixels. Every object is generated mathematically, which means that there are no pixels, so every object is scalable. It can be small, it can be big, and it will not lose the quality. Vector graphics has a lot of different limitations, but it's perfect when you want to design something big, like for big media, big banners, or when you want to design a logo. Okay, so let's focus on the basic tools. So let's start with direct selection and standard selection. So once again, I will create a simple ellipse. Let me change the color so it would be easier to explain some of the things. So I will just remove the stroke and change color to yellow. Okay, so, and let me duplicate this object so we could see two of them. Okay, so right now, when you can see, when I click, when I'm using standard selection tool, it's the shortcut for this is V. I can click between two objects. I can deselect the objects if I click outside them, but what you can see is we can already see the bounding box around our objects. So this means that we are able to scale them. So I can grab this element, I can scale it any way that I want, or I can click Shift to have exactly the same proportions, like to have it as a circle and not distort it. So this is behaving just like a free transform tool in Photoshop, like the Ctrl-T shortcut that was in Photoshop. So this is pretty similar, but we also got this direct selection tool. So if I click on it, you can see right now the bounding box is not active, but what we can see in here are the anchors. So the anchors and the paths. So every object in Illustrator is created, every vector object in Illustrator is created by anchors and by paths. So anchor, path, anchor, path, anchor, path, and so on and so on. So I am able to right now to grab only one anchor and to modify how it behaves. So this is important, how you actually select it. So right now if I click on it, you can see that the rectangle is blue inside, and the ones that are not selected are empty inside. So if I grab it like this, I will select those two anchors, and those two anchors are not selected anymore. So right now I am actually able to move my two anchors, to modify a shape, to actually have something like a lemon shape. Actually I did it by accident. It was not my goal to make a lemon, but generally you can see. So right now I've accidentally selected only one, and I am able to move the only one anchor. So let's delete this object and let's focus on this for a moment. So once again, standard selection, you can move the object, everything behaves just like free transform tool in Photoshop. You are able to distort, you are able to scale it with the correct proportions. And the second option, direct selection tool, allows us to modify our paths and our anchors. So this is quite important, the difference between those two tools. The next tool that that I'm going to explain is the standard rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, and start tools. So rectangle, quite obvious. If we create rectangle with Shift, we are getting actually a square. If I would like to create rectangle and not a square, I just need to release Shift during the creation. So as always, Shift maintains the the perfect proportions. So I've created my rectangle or a square, depending, it's both of those objects actually. As you can see, it has two properties. So one is fill, and the second one is stroke. So if I change the fill color, it changed the color of the object. So it changed the color that actually fills the object. So you can see that we've got like this path is constrained, and everything inside our path that we've created we are changing with the fill option. What is important is that fill is not only it could not only be a color, but it could be some pattern, it could be a gradient. So we've got some predefined options like with gradients. We've got also some patterns, but let's just focus on the colors. So this is the fill color, and the second option that you are able to see here is actually the stroke. So the stroke, let's turn on some kind of stroke. So right now we cannot see anything. This is because the stroke is super thin. It has only 1 point of thickness. So if I improve the thickness of the stroke, you can see that actually we've got stroke around our path. It starts in the center of our path, and inside we've got our fill color. The second thing that actually we are able to do with the stroke is to click in here and to modify how our stroke will behave. So the stroke can behave in few different ways. It can have a different caps. It will be visible only when there is like when the path is not closed. So that does not change a thing at this point. But corner actually would change. So you can see that the corners will behave differently. And the next thing, we've got align stroke. So as you can see, the path right now is here. If I click to align on the outside of the path, the stroke is on the outside of the path. And if I click in here, the stroke is aligned on the inside of the path. And this is by default on the center of the path. Of course, what I can do is I can turn off, for example, fill color completely. So right now, this would be my rectangle that is not filled with any color. So this is the stroke, and it behaves actually correct. What is worth to mention, because you may encounter this problem, because by default I think it's turned on Illustrator. So if I change the size of my square with stroke, everything changes correctly. But in your case, what may happen actually is sometimes you should go to Edit, Preferences, General, and depending on what you need, you've got options called Scale, Strokes and Effects. If I disable it, what you may see, let me duplicate. So once again with Alt, I will duplicate my object, and if I change the size right now, the stroke stays so thick as in here, but the path has changed, so it looks like completely different object. So keep in mind, if you have that problem, you can go to Edit, Preferences, General, and you've got Scale, Strokes and Effects. So the next important tool is Pen tool. So it allows us to create any shape that we want, like we're creating anchor, and automatically it connects to anchors with a path. So right now I've created this random shape. As you can see, it has only stroke, so I can click in here to invert. So right now it has only fill. We can change, of course, fill color. So this is the pen tool, and as you can see, if I once again click on direct selection tool, I am able to modify my anchors. So I can grab any element and I can move it and modify it. As we take a closer look to the pen tool, so once again, when I right click, when I left click and hold my mouse button, I have access to additional tools. So one is add anchor point and one is delete anchor point tool. They are quite obvious, although I will explain them. So if I click add anchor point and I click on the path, this way I've added anchor point to my path. If I click delete anchor point, I will remove the anchor point, so I'm able to modify once again the tools that I've created. And the last one, anchor point tool, let me explain it in a different way. So if I create two objects, one would be ellipse and one would be square. As you can see, they both built in the same way. They've got 4 anchors and 4 paths, so the same is with circle, and the same is with circle, and the same is with square. So if I click and hold my anchor point tool and click in here, I would be able to modify the anchors. So right now I've modified the anchors. I got rid of those elements that were visible just a moment ago. So let me show you those elements. So by those elements I mean this Bezier controllers. So as you can see right now, when we created almost good circle, like it was not perfect, you can see this Bezier handles, which allows us to control how our line and curve is behaving. So right now the Bezier handle is connected, but if I click and hold out, I am able to actually break the connection and to modify it. And once again, if I click on this tool, so anchor point tool, the same thing you have available in here. So I can click in here, or I can click in here. As you can see, it's like there is some problem in Illustrator, like it still showed us something. So convert is available in here and in here. Anchors are available in here, so we are still able to modify those tools. So generally, some of the tools you would be able to see on the right side, some of the tools you would be able to see on the left side. It's up to you which one you choose. So this was another tool, so the pen tool. Next one that would be important for us, especially when it comes to designing the logo, would be type tool. And type tool, so let's click on this tool, and we've got few different ways of creating typography in Illustrator. So let me show you those two basic ones. So I will just type something. So I typed one text, and I will create another. Okay, so I've created two layers with text. Well, let me change the size for it so we can see it a little bit better. Accidentally I've distorted it, so let's go back. So we would not have distorted text. So generally the text looks similar, like it's the same font, but look what's happening. If I hover over here, you can see the whole text box, and if I change the text box size, actually nothing changes. And in here, the text box is actually adjusted to the size of my letters, and if I click in here, I am able to modify the text. So what has happened? I've created the text in two different ways. So one text was created by using type tool, and the other was used by area type tool. So type tool will be available only if you left click and type the text. And the second option, so the area type tool, would be available if you click left mouse button and hold, and this way you are creating this text box. And this text box, as you can see, like especially if you got whole paragraph of text, the text would adjust itself to fit the box. Of course, if there is not enough place for text, you can see that there is this red icon that shows us that there is more text, but it is not able to show us everything because the box is too small. So this is the text tool. Kind of obvious, and there are other options available in there that I will go into details in a moment. So and actually this one is the most important thing. So the type on a path tool. So type on a path is available in here. So if I create, for example, circle, and click on my text, select type on a path tool. So let me just change the color of my circle to show it a little bit better. You can see this is the path, right? You can see the path creates the circle. I can even disable everything. Like so right now we've got only a path, but it does not have any fill, and it does have not any stroke. So if I click on type on a path tool and click in here, I am able to put the text exactly in the spot that I want to. So so this is something that it's very useful, because we are able to create like this circular text, place it for example in a circle, like if you want to have a some symbol in the center and text wrapping it around. So this is very useful stuff. So another very useful tool is envelope distort. So let me show you how to actually do it. It works best when it comes to text, but we are able to use it with any object. So let's start with some simple text, and let's maybe try to mimic some real life logos. So this is, let's say we are trying to create like this really simple Netflix logo. I already know that this font would more or less work fine, so let's make it bigger. Let's change the color to dark red, and what you can see in here is make envelope. So if I click on it, I've got this warp option available in here. So I already know that actually how the Netflix logo looks like, so I can find something called arc lower option here, and I can change the bend to something like this, and let's click OK. So this way we've created, maybe not identical because font is probably a little bit different, but as you can see, like in quite easy way we are able to modify our font. What is important is that actually we are able still to modify it further, and you are able to change the options that you want and use those additional stuff. So maybe it will work better for you in some situation. I strongly recommend to experiment with different options, because some of them are really interesting. So the next thing is what if we would try to use envelope distort on objects. So if I would create a circle, there is no option to make it envelope distorted, right? The same thing that we've made with text. But I can still go to object, click on envelope distort, click make with warp, and we've got access to almost the same function. What is actually useful sometimes is that when you especially when you've got text and some kind of symbol and you want them to change them simultaneously, you are able to select both of those objects, go to object, go to envelope distort, and use this function, and right now actually it will behave in a way that you prefer, so it will be treated as a one symbol. So sometimes that is useful. The next thing that is good to remember, which is sometimes useful, is that if you double click on it, select text, you are still able to modify a text, but as you can see it's changing the whole the whole area that is actually applied, the envelope is applied, so also the circle changes how it behaves. So in a way it's still working, but sometimes the result could be strange, so remember about that. Okay, so by using this simple tools, envelope distort, we've created Netflix logo. But let me show you something different, something super simple and still working. So I just created a rectangle. I will rotate it. I'm using Shift to rotate it 45 degrees. Let's click on direct selection tool. Let's grab this one anchor. Let's put this in here, and let's duplicate the layer. So I can duplicate with Alt button. And this way we've created like super fast and super easy version of logo of Citroen, and it's still like it's vector, it's scalable, so even if we would like to print it super huge, it will still maintain good quality. And last thing I think it's worth to mention, it's how the layers behave in Illustrator. So let me create just two simple objects, change the colors to them. And let's duplicate the star, and once again change the color. So right now we've got three different objects in our image. Sometimes it's when we in Photoshop we are working on layers, and this is something that actually sometimes it's a little bit more confusing in Illustrator, because in Illustrator we also working with the layers, but actually in layers we can have few different objects. So as you can see, we've got layer named layer 1, and this is our layer 1, and all those three objects are in layer 1. We can create another layer, so it looks like another folder in Photoshop, and let's put the text, just any text. And as you can see, the text I will put the text on top. So right now the text is on top and everything is below. But even if I grab my square, right click on it and click arrange, bring to front, it's not the text is not hidden behind my red square. The stars are right now below the red square, but the text is not hidden. The text is not hidden because the layer with the text is still on top. So remember about that sometimes it may be confusing, like the layers are not behaving like you would expect. And the reason for it, one of the reasons it may be that it's in a different layer. And generally, like I tend to have everything in one layer, like every object in one layer. So this way I am able to like grab the rectangle, right click, click arrange, send to back, or arrange, send, bring to front, or click Ctrl and brackets on my keyboard just to move the layers around. So this way I have the biggest control of them. But if you're working on others person project and something is behaving strange when it comes to layers and you want to arrange the layers differently, but you find a problem, check out this box, so the layers, and see if there are not additional layers that may confuse you.